had in late 1990s had everything of historical contribution removed from it. It's just EFS and bad 90s office space on the inside. So that project ran into funding difficulties in 2018 and went on hold. We had been holding the site plan application open by asking for extensions while they looked for a new equity partner. And in the meantime, they have not been maintaining the property particularly well. They found a new equity partner that's looking to acquire the property from them and begin construction on the project. We have an extension, a final extension on the site plan application through August, and would need to begin construction before that. So the new owners, or the potential new owners, they have an option to buy the property as they work through these things, have hired Ashton McGraw, my firm, to continue the design work and complete construction documents. And they have also, to their credit, done full asbestos abatement on the existing building and fixed the roof, which was causing problems with the building. So they are very much committed to the success of the project. However, in the time that it elapsed from 2018 to 2022, construction costs have changed dramatically, construction feasibility has changed dramatically, and some of the initial design decisions that we made have become difficult for them to execute. When we were looking about a month ago at the project in order to try to get it over the hump, there was a few items that we identified as the big cost drivers for the project. I'll walk through all of them, although I don't think all of them are germane to this conversation. Mm-hmm. But the first is that we were getting 100 parking spaces on a single-story parking garage using car stackers, like you see in New York City and parking lots. And those car stackers turned out to be the single most expensive thing in the project. And so we're going back to the site plan, planning commission, to try to eliminate that requirement. There is no other way to get more than one layer of parking in the building because of the tight site. There's no way to get ramps to multiple floors or anything like that. The second request is when we initially applied, we had a mechanical penthouse at the top level that had water equipment, boilers, cooling equipment, all of that kind of stuff. One of the things we've done in the interim is the building is going to be LEED Gold. It's a requirement of the equity fund that is the equity partner of the developer. So in doing that, we are using a high-efficiency HVAC system that doesn't require those systems at the roof. And so we are looking to request that we replace that penthouse with additional residential units that would allow us to, without raising the height of the building, but it would change the form of the building somewhat, would allow us to get 12 more units in the building, which would improve their revenue situation. And then the last item is something that's kind of evolved over time. Was when we came to you, we had a tan concrete panel and a gray fiber cement panel as the primary cladding on the building. That tan concrete panel will be a ultra compact phenolic panel, Fundermax, if anybody's aware of it. It's a colorful solid panel. But the other area where the fiber cement is, we've had, for a couple of reasons. One is that we've had problems with the construction use of that fiber cement. It's the same material we used on the COE a couple blocks away. And at this height, we couldn't find a contractor that wanted to use it. We looked at using a metal composite panel to replace that, but they're both extremely expensive. There's also some sustainability concerns around metal composite and the fact that you can't recycle it. So we're looking at using a single skin aluminum panel that would have different ribs in it, and we would basically line it up vertically with a joint at each window level. I brought a sample of that because I want to show that it's not like an agricultural utility corrugated panel. This is an architectural panel. So these panels, by changing the dimension of the raised versus recessed portion, we would get a number of different profiles. So we'd be using 3 different of these panels with 3 different sets of profiles to get kind of more of a texture on the building rather than a really rigid set of stripes. It looks very stripy in the elevations. The renderings showed a little better, and in actual practice, we're going to offset each row so that they don't line up throughout the building. But in the interest of time, we had to show them as going straight through. So I have a couple of boards, and I think really what's striking about them is they're the same renderings. We changed out the penthouse to the additional floor of residential. And truthfully, my client asked me to come and ask for 2 floors of residential, and I suggested we ask for one that goes to that maintains the existing building height. They would love 2 floors of residential because that's the maximum height they can build with that construction type, because it's a light gauge frame that can go to 13 stories. But that was, I think, probably more appropriate. So I'm going to show you those renderings real quick, but I think what's most obvious about them is not much looks different.
Yeah, I just wanted to add here that this project is for comment to the zoning.
For the Planning Commission.
For the Planning Commission. So these are comments relative to the historic assessment that we are considering as the original building and the addition as a separate building. I also want to say that it's unique that a project's going for LEED Gold, and therefore there is an extra lift going on here for the future of all these buildings in our environmental condition, and that is simply part of the program, as well as is to get as many rooms as possible is part of the program. So I just wanted to state that there are a complex set of factors going on here. And I think also, just quickly, since you just showed that one material, that's for all of the grayish looking panels that are vertically striped, and they will be a series of variety of setbacks, and that whole panel system, as I look at the rendering, stands out further and beyond the tan material. It does. And the tan material, describe that again. Did you say it's?
It's a beige flat matte panel.
But the material of it is.
So the material it's a phenolic resin panel. So it's
solid.
Lots of layers of craft paper,
right.
Cast under pressure in a phenolic resin.
Right.
And then a colorful layer is put on the outer layer, kind of with whatever finish we want, and it's going to be kind of a tan concrete color.
Right. Okay. So it'll look like a concrete panel that was your previous submission, and it's a high design standard for this use and purpose, both in permanence and structural adherence to the building, and its function as a rain screen, because that's a rain screen.
It is a rain screen. Yeah, they're both rain screen systems.
Thank you.
You used the word feasibility in your initial description of why you're asking for these changes, and so feasibility is that because of what you said subsequently to be understood as what it will cost you.
Yeah, so the project has the new purchaser and my new client is a developer that works with institutional investors to build projects like this. And their institutional investor is a fund that has very strict return criteria on their investments. And so the construction cost of the project without the changes exceeds their investment criteria to invest in the project. And so they have a funding deadline on May 24th to come back to them with a revised project that meets their financial criteria. I know that's not the purview of this board, but that I'm just being transparent with what's going on. To me, just from a personal standpoint, I mean, I think this is an example of nicer development than what's happening in a lot of these kind of 4-story wood buildings that are going up in that area. But it is a more expensive way to build, and the building on that site with the church there, we're looking at some very so rather than, for instance, driving piles, which could damage the church, we're using crack injection to literally inject cement into the soils for 100 feet and turn the soils into higher grade soils so we can use conventional foundations without damaging the existing building. We're doing a lot of things like that are required really to build the building, but they're also quite expensive and make the returns more difficult. So one of the ways that they're looking to improve their financial feasibility is cutting costs, so removing the car stackers, and these panels are less expensive than what we had shown. And then the other way that they're trying to do that is increase the revenue by adding 12 units.
So 1 floor equals 12 units?
Yes. So we're only adding a floor at the back. We know that this board felt very strongly about the 8 stories at the Genesee Street was the maximum that was tolerable, and we aren't touching that.
Right. I was just going to make the comment that nothing else has changed on this entire new building except for the rear along Cedar Street, the additional
Correct.
1-story, everything.
And the finish.
And the finishes. So
Yep.
those are our 2 primary objectives here today, is a new 12th story and finishes material-wise to the entire new building, correct?
Correct.
How many parking spaces will be provided?
37.
And how many apartments?
It's 201.
What's the, are these all single? How many beds per apartment?
They're studios 1s and 2s.
What's the total population?
It's primarily 1-bedroom apartments, so I think it's
Okay.
just under 300 beds.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
well, let me say this. If you had the car stackers, what was the maximum spaces that you could?
It was around 100.
3-story stackers.
Yeah, it would be triple stackers, and there's a couple of issues with them. One is the structurally just getting the height for them, but that's fairly solvable. That's really not the cost driver. The issue is that the stackers themselves, so 37 stackers for the building is $2.8 million, which is a lot of cost per parking space, and they would have to be managed by a human being 24 hours a day. So there's the ongoing cost of 3 staff members full-time.
That's really what the cost is.
Yeah.
What is the variance between what is required and...
So the requirement in that area is 1 parking space per unit. We had a for parking. We had a waiver to reduce it to what we could realistically get into the building footprint, as well as to an off-site space on Washington Street, which is going to continue to be used by the project.
How many spaces are provided on?
There's 25 entitled to the project, but there's 75 spaces on the parcel.
Okay.
But as you said, the cost of both the main operational cost and the initial investment cost is.
I just want to add at this point that our view is comment on historic context and not.
Yeah.
No, I understand fully. I'm just trying to make it clear that the difficulties they're having with reductions in requirements is simply part of the project process, and we can comment on impact on site, historic neighborhood,
Right.
And that's it. And I say that positively, not to try and mislead you that we have any authority in zoning conditions.
So just a couple of comments. So it would have been a 3-story bay for these parking?
Yeah, so we would have
What are you
dug.
using that space for now?
We're lowering the building slightly to get that extra floor within because the penthouse was not as tall as a residential floor, so we're lowering the parking level and then adding that story
Your
there.
37 parking spaces are inside in the addition off of Cedar Street.
They are entered off of Genesee Street, but they're under the building footprint.
Under the, okay.
Yeah, they're under that entire L-shaped building footprint.
Okay. And then just to follow up on the off-site parking, this is slightly reminiscent of the other project on Kraus and Genesee where they were where they used, they wanted to use that parcel at Kraus.
Adjacent site.
The old house parcel.
Yeah,
at
adjacent
Kraus
site,
and Washington.
yeah, another site.
On
That's, again, the developer's looking for other parking right now.
Well, it's slightly reminiscent.
Yes.
I do want to.
I just don't know the context of this is on-street parking or is this?
No, it's a lot. They purchased it from Paul Sack, and they own it. In the proposed zoning that's being considered by the city, which I know is not relevant to this conversation, but there would be no parking required at all. So,
Back to the building, the only thing that I'll comment on is, my concern is the pedestrian sense next to the parking on that first, just because there are other buildings that we've seen that have done this, where it's parking at grade, and it's not tremendously pedestrian friendly.
understood.
Against
So
this wall.
So on Genesee Street, we've moved the building lobby to Genesee so on Genesee Street, there's a parking entrance and then a glass lobby, as well as there's going to be a cafe inside the lobby. That'll be a public cafe.
I remember that.
On Cedar Street, Cedar Street's is actually property of Office of Mental Health. It's not actually a public street. And the Office of Mental Health has asked us to have nothing at all of any sort facing onto Cedar Street. And it was their request that, we can't even have our emergency exits enter onto Cedar Street. We have they kind of work their way back around to Genesee because the state won't allow us. But the only thing that occurs on Cedar Street is trash pickup and the ventilation louvers for the parking.
Just a comment on
Oh, I totally agree with you. I don't like it either from an urban standpoint.
Yeah. Again, I'd like to make a couple of comments generally to the project relative to historic context. The addition of this new building to the Christian Science scale brings up the classic issue of new fenestration, scale, color, material relative to the existing Christian Science classical scale, material, and so on. Certainly color. My concerns here are scale, and it's really more or less to you than to zoning, but it's the purview of this board. And that is that the large-scale articulations of the facades that you've previously submitted seem to be missing a fit between the large-scale elements and the whole body. And what I'm saying is that in a classical architecture, you see a scale from colonnade to pediment to the entire round scale of this, and then the windows are a step down of either large, two-story, and then with a windowsill and its modulation coming down. So the new building seems to be lacking that middle zone articulation of your big field and your accent panels. And that would be a design issue. But it might nest together these two materials with kind of a missing material. Maybe it's an edge, and maybe it's slid down in certain engagements and broke the scale of the large gray mass with small fit elements where they're more locked like a puzzle. And again, that's your area. What I'm looking at is the kind of missing comfort of the fenestration in a very small way to the classical approach of having a sequence of scales up through the whole structure. So it's a matter of engaging the large scale of the new building and finding a way to have it have the same language in some way of the historic context. Any other comments? Kate, we've seen that the new submission to us without a penthouse generally is in line with the previous proposals. I don't see any other major issue. Material that changed, pardon?
What was previously approved.
Previously approved, and material, and I'll let you go to those panels quick. I think you wanted to do a little bit more there. But the materials, we haven't seen real samples. We've seen one piece of real sample. I haven't seen sample number 2. We understand it, and the facades as presented are the same material change, and I think we're okay with those. You've shown them technically, and did you want to show any more on them?
Yeah, I mean, I can show you. I'll bring them up, but they're the same views from the same rendering model that we used the first time around, with the building changed out, and you can see that they're not substantially different.
Okay, then we're...
Just a general question, what is the proposed use of the existing structure in this development?
They're looking for tenants. They're currently, actually later today, touring it with somebody that's looking for a performance venue. There is conversations about a small food hall concept. There's been a few different users. Truthfully, it's a fairly difficult building to reuse because there's a sloped concrete floor. It's actually not the circle. Yeah. It's that the sanctuary floor is a sloped concrete floor that follows that, and anything we reuse has to somehow work around that sloped concrete. We can't remove it because it's structurally integrated to the building. Right. So it'll stay there forever, but we'll have to work through how we deal with that change in levels and accessibility and things like that.
It's retained as a performance venue.
That's ideal.
The concourse is flat. There's a series of steps, I think.
No, it's an amphitheater type floor, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So
around the perimeter.
Around the perimeter at the bottom, on the ground floor, is multiple levels as well.
Right.
So the lobby kind of steps down, and then it steps up into the sanctuary. The sanctuary doesn't have actually any flat floors anywhere in the whole thing.
Right.
So it's sort of 2 different pitches, and at the higher pitch, they went back and kind of built out some tiers on top of the concrete, but it's a steep sloped concrete floor and then a shallow sloped concrete floor, and at no point does it level out. The difficulty with the performance venue is there's no back of house, because the only space behind the stage is the former organ cavity, which is now at Sacred Heart. So that was luckily salvaged and moved because it's a very beautiful old organ, and hasn't been damaged, luckily.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant? Any other comments relative to passing issues on to zoning? Well, then we thank you for the presentation.
Great project.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Good luck with it.
Glad to see it come back alive.
As Tom says,
Me too. We have 6 weeks to find out if it's going to really go or not, but this is the first step.
First steps. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good luck with it. It's a great site to try and preserve, so thank you, and your new owners. Very good. Okay, moving along here. Special permit. Is this Kate is the right one? Let's see here.
451 Burnett.
Sorry, yeah, 451, 65 Burnett.
Okay. Is the applicant here?
The applicant is not here.
Okay. Has everyone had a
so
chance to
this-
look at this site? And
Yeah, so
Yes.
this is, and you do have the paperwork. Yes, you do have the paperwork for this. So actually, this is not unlike the Main Street.
Yeah. Well, I was waiting for Tom to say, no.
Or protect
the boundaries.
Yeah.
Protect the
So
boundaries.
so the business that is seeking parking
Front time glass.
faces Burnett.
yes.
Backs onto this parcel that fronts Holly.
Is the applicant the Bonton Companies? Is that the
Yes.
applicant? Fine.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
And
This is the parcel where the building collapsed. There was an old, I believe. It was,
I thought that was at the corner. Was that the?
No,
that was
I think this is
yeah.
this is the one that just fell over from neglect. So
So this is, so this is an application for employee parking only, correct?
That is correct, and it is
Right.
off of Holly, which is
Within the
the
district.
southern border of the boundary of the district. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no connection in these drawings to the dock at the back of the Bonton building, and I've known that was once a service entrance request years ago. Okay, and so I just wanted to say this application's clearly for parking.
It's for parking.
Well,
Parking.
I found it interesting. They're saying 10. It's only 8 spaces unless they're counting parallel parking along the eastern side. Yeah, and that they have no respect to the front yard setback. I thought they would actually push the parking a little further back into the lot itself.
It looks like they've approached the one building on the right, or the east end, as a setback. But that's certainly an issue. So this is employee parking only.
But is parking appropriate
Right.
anyway? I mean, we're talking about setbacks, but
Okay. Right. Yep.
but shouldn't we be dealing first with the
Yeah.
fact that they're
Okay.
putting parking in a residential district,
Okay,
historic district?
Right. Well, I was just
Okay, let me ask a very practical question.
thinking the
Let me ask a very practical question about that. With vacant lots, which occur over time, loss of a house, a fire, collapse, whatever it is, lots become available in historic districts, or for that matter, in the rest of our city, with the small lots we've had. Is it appropriate to every so often have a site become a neighborhood parking to get the parking, to meet the parking demand on the streets that the houses cannot manage? That's a planning issue. My personal point of view, is that every so often in a densely populated area, it is appropriate to have a lot properly screened and set back for neighborhood cars, residents' cars, if you wish. In this case, employees' cars. That's a planning issue, and it's a historic issue, historic neighborhood planning issue. So my recommendation, it seems to be yes for temporary use, maybe, and of course that's a slippery slope.
Temporary use.
Well, what is this? Well, is this
temporary.
then? No, wait, please. Thank you. Is this application for temporary use as a parking lot? Okay, and therefore permanent use. But do they own it?
I believe so.
That's a key issue.
Yeah.
If they own it, then that would be a key issue. That's a key issue. Is it permanent or not? So anyhow, those are two sides of the same story.
The transitional refers to the different zoning.
Then I'm wrong. I'm wrong in using that term. I was thinking
Transitional, yeah, it's because
Yeah. temporary. I meant
business-
temporary. I did not mean. I meant temporary use.
it's not temporary, no.
Because I could see a
Transitional
temporary
is-
use permit in a
It's
site.
a transitional parking, so it's a special permit because the parking is not allowed
Right.
in this zone,
Okay.
in this zoning district.
Okay, good.
Right, so, and it is basically off-premise parking, even though it's,
So if it's
So it's two different properties, but they own.
they own the properties, two different zoning districts.
right. So that's the key question.
And the
historic district goes across the back lot line of Holly.
That's correct.
So using zoning language, this is equivalent to a use variance as opposed to an area variance.
Presumably, yes.
Use.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, at least officially, from the point of view of states that boards like, from this New York State, that boards like us should be very careful about use permits versus area permits
Yes.
or variances.
That's a solid point. Well, I think we approach this just like we approached the Green Street issue where
Wayne Street?
I'm sorry, thank you, Wayne Street issue where it was the same sort of idea. We have a parking lot for tenants and for business, for commercial uses within a historic district on a perimeter street. And we resoundingly said no to that application. And this is almost a carbon copy
Okay.
in front of us today.
Okay, good.
This is a change of use.
Yeah. So-
Change of use. Have we heard anything from neighbors or the historic district regarding this application?
We have a commenter in the audience, if he wishes to stand and make a statement.
Glenn Lewis and I live on Howard Street in the Historic District. I think that...
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
Pardon me?
welcome, Glenn.
Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. I think it's exactly the same issue as Wayne Street, and it's an impingement on the boundary. And in addition to that, just like Wayne Street, within a few feet of the location, there is existing parking, and for the user, for the church that's there, there's no conflicting uses in terms of time of use. So if they really need parking, they could simply go across the street, park there, and completely not affect the church use of the parking lot and keep the lot pretty much the way that it is.
Okay.
We haven't had meetings about it. I've just kind of talked to one other person, but I haven't talked to several people, so I'm really just kind of speaking for myself and not the group.
Good, thank you, Glenn. Thank you, I appreciate it. Appreciate you coming here. I've also heard from neighborhoods, and they said they would be here today, they're not, that they are against it, and this is from an owner in the district. But it's an informal comment without them standing here.
I just want to say, I misspoke. I'm on the wrong block for that building that collapsed. That was
Okay.
for a block down, so I'm incorrect about that. I'm not sure what that property was.
Any other discussion on this?
Is this perhaps the period where this is developing? This is not at the point yet where neighboring residents are required to be informed of what's going on, or are we already far along that we're in the process where the other residents have to be informed?
It will be noted, so the plan, this will need to go in front of the planning commission, and because it's a special use permit, and there will be a proper public hearing at that time, and all the neighbors will be
Okay,
within
very good.
400 feet.
That's what should happen. That's good to hear. That was one of the questions I had from the neighborhood, and
I just wanted to underline what I had said before, and part of it is timely to me because on March 9th, once again, the county symposium is coming up for members of boards like ours, and the representatives from Albany will, I'm sure, once again repeat that boards like ours should be careful about granting use variances.
Okay. So do we have a clear summary of our comments to the zoning? That it is seen as not appropriate, period. Okay, let's go on.
Right. And here,
Now there's one more. North Salina Street, which is the Huber Brewer application for a sign on top.
this one just came yesterday, so.
This is the former bank.
Yeah, Niagara Bank.
Yeah,
Just before Willow?
I think that they're
North
still
facade.
using the drive-through. It's a different bank now, but.
For deposits to Huber Brewer.
Yeah, First Niagara.
Oh, you have
I
it.
made a copy of this,
copy,
yeah, because I
okay.
wanted to see exactly what they intended.
What they intended, and do you have the old?
I don't have the rest of it, no.
You don't need it.
Kate, I had a question I sent you earlier about, do we know specifically what the variance is being asked based on what's allowable and how they've either exceeded it or not?
I can't tell you the degree to which they have exceeded it, but it is in terms of location, being on the second floor or third floor.
Fourth floor.
Fourth floor, fifth floor. Size. And size and probably number, because so Huber Brewer, they own the building, and they're planning on moving an office into the building.
Really?
Yeah, apparently. Or I don't know if it's a new office or in addition to, and they are looking to basically identify the building as their own.
And it's illuminated, too.
It's illuminated, and
Is the first Niagara sign?
Pardon?
Is the
Yes.
first Niagara sign,
Yeah,
they're
so
not-
this would be replacing. This would be
Basically,
It's
replacing.
actually better than the first Niagara sign.
I would agree.
Yes.
Well, I think, again, we should go from what, I'd like to know what the variance is, so that would be a question I
So
would
what
still have.
building or buildings do they own? Just the one with the?
Actually, I believe it is
Because,
this is actually all
Connected.
connected.
well, so
And they own the whole
the whole block?
block.
From James all the way up?
That's my understanding, that it is one building.
Could be.
Jeez.
I guess my one question would be,
Well, because that's going to help with the
we're talking about signage.
linear footage for their sign. I'm sorry, linear footage for their sign.
Correct.
If they only have one sign.
They're showing letters here. But is this part of the sign? Or
No,
is
that's
that just-
the brick. That's the brick background.
Well,
Yeah.
they give dimension.
Yeah, they do.
So they're, okay, yeah.
They do give a dimension.
So it's just in terms of,
Oh, that's the height to the roof. That's the dimension to the roof of the adjacent building. 19 feet.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Because it's showing an offset of 3 feet from the corner.
Well, again, from our point of view, I would request that we know what the allowable signage is and what they're requesting as a,
So they're not
That's
gonna
actu-
allow this.
okay,
So, which is why they need a waiver.
but First Niagara was not allowed
First, Niagara got was approved a sign waiver.
a sign waiver as
A
well.
sign waiver as well.
Do we know what year that was?
2007
When
was
does that
the
all-
first round, and then 2009 they came back because they changed the colors a bit, and the LPB had no comment at that point.
well, again, I fall back on the issue of what work are we supposed to do and do we want to do? I don't want to be doing the signage review at the landmark level. It should be done at zoning or the permitting. I would, from my point of view here, would speak to first compliance with the signage requirements and see what they need to do in excess or justify this. That would be my view. We're in an age of, Cynthia, what you're talking about here. Look at what signage is doing to historic buildings. We're in an age of putting signs. I don't know if you've been up by Manley Fieldhouse lately. Manley Fieldhouse has added about 80 feet of naming of illuminated sign hanging down from what was a very beautiful design for its first 50 years. In other words, the Manley Fieldhouse, the round fieldhouse down there, and it had a beautiful articulate structure, and they took the lights up underneath to make an elegant structural space. Now there's a sign up there because of a donor and the funds that come with the donor that is probably 4.5 foot high, illuminated orange and white signs that go for about 70 feet underneath that and cover up all that architecture. So that's that's what I saw this week. So I may be a little bit sensitive. Back to this issue, I'd like to, from our point of view, know what they're asking for in exceeding what's allowed. And if it wants to come from zoning to us and say it's exceeding, do we want a yes/no answer or a recommendation?
So I guess what I can tell you is that the zoning ordinance does not, the sign ordinance, the sign provisions do not allow this. They base their signage on the linear frontage, and it's probably, in this district, it's probably 1 to 1. I mean, 1 square foot to 1 linear foot of, or the other
Street
way.
front.
1 linear foot of
Street front.
storefront to
1 square foot of sign.
foot of sign. So the question becomes, well, first of all, so they're not, so in answer to your question, they are not allowed this. However, and then the additional question is this the only sign? Or what are they doing about tenant signage too?
Right.
Because that's an additional question.
Okay, so what?
And unless they are the sole tenant, and so that is, you have seen, Barclay Damon has their name up on their building. Different.
They are Fran and Kuhn.
They have the lawyers firm at One Park Place.
Oh, yeah.
Zoning has allowed these types of of signs when you're either the sole tenant or the, you know, you, or not own it, but are, maybe not the sole tenant, but are, have the most amount of, you know, more than 50% of the.
You're 50% one.
Okay, let's try and boil this back to historic overview.
Right.
Does this application enhance, benefit, or damage the historical context of the neighborhood and the building?
Has nothing to do with the neighborhood, Bob. This is a billboard on the side of the building.
On this building, which is part of the neighborhood, yeah. What I'm saying is, there's the historic context, yeah?
Yeah, the sign does not do anything for the neighborhood. It's a billboard. It's meant to be seen from the adjacent highway.
It's a building. It's a building that, if you know what I mean. The sign itself is a sign.
Yeah.
Pardon?
It's a sign.
It's a sign, and it's acting as a billboard 5 stories up.
Yeah, it's on a building. It's on a historic building.
Okay, so
So a little different. So
it is, but I mean, we've had this issue before on the Onondaga Savings Bank building, when it's 10 stories up. Who's it serving?
Well, I would remove yourself from that position and go back to the building, just the
Sure,
historic
okay.
buildings and the neighborhood that you see
I see
as a
no
historic
benefit to
district.
it.
Pardon me?
I see no benefit to it. If they got rid of Huber Brewer and they just used your logo, just as a HB.
No, don't do their work for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't see any benefit.
Just beyond the historical context.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Sure.
need to narrow your discussion to what is board have to review over. And I don't think it's what benefit the sign has to anybody. It's what's the context.
Impact.
From a historical
Yeah, okay.
perspective and any of that.
Impact on the historical perspective.
Well, I
And that
see.
makes our job simpler, which it should
I see
be.
there's a negative impact on our historic structure here. I think it's far too large and not.
Is that a fair comment from all the board members to
I
say?
would not agree.
All right, would you express your point of view, please?
Well, number one, there's been a precedent that has been set by the previous tenant. The other thing that I look to is that many buildings of this era actually had painted signage.
Anything that could be submitted to support this historically we'd love to see it.
I mean,
Any
you can
photograph.
Look at some of the buildings up off of North Salina Street where you see the ghosting of previous
Well,
signages.
look at Smith Restaurant Supply issue that's clear to us all.
Right.
So if we had any supporting documents from the applicant, that would help immensely in the discussion we're having.
That's a fair point.
Previous signage?
Historic signage, anything in the original building period. That's what my comment was in my note this morning. Any photographs of the defining period of this district, which is the buildings, and we've got 150 years there of potential signage on that wall. Let's see what they did. If there's any supporting documents to this application, that would make a difference. Any other?
It might be
yeah.
hard, just if I'm looking at the brickwork, there might have been a lot of redos on that brickwork.
Fine.
Yeah, but an old photograph would show.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
So, I mean, that's why, I don't have a problem with it in terms of being a negative to the neighborhood.
Because.
And it's a business district, number one. Number two, because of precedent that's been set before in terms of building signage.
I don't know that
It's not
that's...
street signage, I'm looking at it
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah.
And I won't use the term that, because it is not a billboard, it's definitely signage.
Sure.
But
Again.
historically, there have been signs like this, particularly in a business district.
I would love to see references to it historically. And I mean, that would support the case, and it would help us not try and figure it out.
Right. I mean, that's...
Yeah. So let's ask, we would love to see that more, ask the applicant, that we would, or ask zoning. We'd like to see supporting evidence of signage in this location of the historic context to help us make a comment. Otherwise, our comment is mixed. What do you say here?
They're going to bring the person I have to begin with, so... I mean, first
You're selling on this one right here.
Good for you. Well, there's tons of signage. I love historic signage. Absolutely love it.
That picture is from the wrong angle over there, Cynthia.
Okay.
I'm just looking to see what else we've got, so. You know,
Have-
one historic reference.
Okay. I think we know the point. I think we would like to know two things as a board, if I can say that. We'd like to know if where this exceeds the current signage. I don't think precedent is a case for permitting continued precedents that are damaging to the historic district.
Unless that was a special use or...
Well, again, I would... yeah.
I will ask
Thank you.
them. I'll
Thank
ask
you.
the applicant.
We'd like to see more to help
Yeah.
from our point of view. Is that it for today? Are there any other items? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Great.
We're done.
Great. And all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, hold on, yeah, just turn this off.